Do you love me? Most of the time when I ask that question in all my parishes and here at the CSC, people would cover their ears and start screaming and make sounds like la 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 la, because they knew that question was going to be followed by some request for them to volunteer for something, to lead some campaign, to help host some dinner, to lead the gala, or give money. They kind of knew what was coming after that question. When Jesus asked Peter, the student who he was grooming for leadership in that fledgling movement he had begun of reform in Judaism, I don't think he asked that question so tongue-in-cheek or with a smile on his face. I don't think he asked it like that at all. I think for Jesus it was a really powerful question, a really vulnerable question. And I think it would be for any of us to ask that of a friend or of a spouse. Do you love me? And yet, it's the question all of us wants to ask. We kind of desperately want to know. Wouldn't we all want to know that before maybe we ask somebody out on a date, or even before we propose to them, and for sure after a horrible fight and terrible hurt? And this is an especially vulnerable question, because this encounter is the first time these two best friends would have talked, since Peter had, with great bravado, promised Jesus he would not betray him, that he would be there for him to the end. The parallels are astonishing. A charcoal fire, Peter, and 3 questions. 3 times Peter was asked as Jesus made his way across the courtyard on that night before he died, after he was condemned to death. 3 times Peter was asked, do you know this man? Do you love this man? Do you follow this man? And all 3 times, this man who spoke with such bravado, all 3 times, he lied. He said, I do not know him. I do not work with him. I have no idea who he is. But now that turns around, and it's not in the night anymore. Now it's in the morning light. This second occurrence, this second parallel occurrence. It's in the morning light around another charcoal fire, this time for breakfast. And this time, Jesus gives Peter a chance. He gives him a chance to turn it around, a chance to make it right, a chance to restore this friendship. 3-time denial. Each failure had to be addressed. None of us dare ignore the hurt that we have caused or that others have caused us. It must be talked about, as painful as that can be as well. So to ask that question with all the vulnerability that it would demand after a time like this, that I can't even imagine mustering myself, even in good times in relationships, to say, hey, do you really love me? It must have been incredibly vulnerable for Jesus to ask that question. Yet, I don't think Jesus could have ever asked that question of this valued friend after that friend had rejected him and betrayed him, whose words would have cut so deeply through his heart. I don't think Jesus could have ever had the courage even to ask Peter that question, do you love me? Had he not somehow deep down still inside trusted that in spite of this friend's failure, he was still a deeply good man and that Peter maybe, hopefully, really did love him. And when Jesus is asked this, and this blows me away because I think our tendency is just the opposite. There's no shame. There's no guilt in his question. There's no recrimination in this repeated question. What Jesus is trying to do is reestablish a relationship with him, get it back off the ground so it could thrive and flourish like it had. All of us have to work hard to reestablish a relationship, even with our spouses. We have to work hard to reestablish our relationships when hurt happens, and it does. So Jesus needed Peter to even hear himself say it. Yes, I love you. And then to show it by helping and leading people Jesus was trying to pull together to experience a great love that he had experienced himself and to be about something new in the world. Jesus wanted Peter to be able to say it. I have a good friend who has never, he's probably now in his 50s, 53, has never, ever, ever told his kids that he loves them. And I nag him, I beg him to say this to his kids, but he keeps saying, Gary, they know I love them. Ask them if I love them. They'll tell you. And yet his kids will say to me, gosh, I'm so scared when he dies, I won't be able to ever have a memory of him ever saying. So this is huge to be able to say, I love you to people, but it's also huge, and probably even more huge, is that a word? Huger? To show it. To show it underlines the words and makes them credible and easier to be heard. He needed Peter to say it so that he would do that and see that, and what this would mean to him, what it would come to mean to him if he's really going to love Jesus. This is what it's going to look like. If you really mean those words now, Peter, this time, instead of all the bravado, if you really mean it, this is what it's going to look like. And in Jesus' words to Peter, then that means feed my sheep, which Peter would have known means I'm about a mission in this world, and I would love you to be a part of it. And I would love you to lead it after I'm gone. We all know about love languages, right? We've been there, heard that, talked about it. I was at a dinner the other day when people asked me what my love language was. But for Jesus, it's apparent in this story that words of affirmation mattered to him. He needed himself to hear Peter say it. But that wasn't his number one love language. His number one love language was service. What brings home to Jesus that he's truly loved, and so he could feel it, is service. Helping Jesus do what was his to do, helping Jesus inaugurate a whole new world in this world. That this would make Jesus feel loved by his friend. What parent doesn't feel loved when we, others, love your children? It's a matter of the love language called service, that when you see somebody caring about your kids, you feel loved by that person because they are you, they are yours. To love somebody's kids is to love them. It brings it home to them. What pastor of a Newman Center would not feel loved by people who are loving his kids, be they 18 to 30? Seriously, though, when I hear about a generous collection like this Easter, when I see people volunteer, like we celebrated last weekend, I feel so loved. And that's why on Easter Sunday morning, I broke down in tears. Jesus did not ask Peter to do something. He asked Peter to do everything. Follow me, he said, with your whole mind, heart, soul, and body. Begin to live this way now in the world yourself. Jesus had way too much experience of Peter to know that he's ever going to do it right, that he was ever going to do it perfectly. I think sometimes when relationships get restored, we're just waiting for the other shoe to fall again. But Jesus knew from the beginning, Peter's not going to do this right all the time. He's not going to do it perfectly. Like all of us, we've said, I love you, and we failed the loved one the next day. It's why so many students tell me they're scared to say I love you to their friends, to their potential lover. Father Gary, what if I wake up tomorrow and I don't feel it? I understand, because that was my hesitation when I was in college too. I was too moody sometimes to trust that the next day I would be consistent with my words the day before. Like all of us. He knew this was a love like every love would be imperfect, which is just not held ever against him. Nor should our imperfections ever be held against us, even by our lovers. He just wanted to reestablish the friendship and get on with it, and let Peter get on what was his to do. We can be the ones to reestablish relationships in our life that have suffered. We can be the ones to help turn it around, you and I. We can. I think most everybody in St. Louis, if not the whole United States of America, has seen Hamilton by now. The Fox has been full every night, every matinee, 4,000 plus people, seats full of people every single day. And this is like the second or third time it's been here. And most of us have seen it on TV now and live streaming. And I hope you all have a strong sense. And if you haven't, I hope you stream it at least from home so you can see this, near the end. Alexander had really betrayed Liza. But also life had betrayed them both. All things were on the table. They were estranged now. They moved uptown, as you know, where things were quieter. But everybody knew about this failure in their relationship. It hit the papers in those days. Hot off the presses, Alexander has an affair while Liza's out of town. And then their son gets killed. And in the quiet of that, not even talking to each other, this time wordless, there's no words for something this deep. As you know, all Liza does is reach over and grab Alexander's hand. And you hear this chant, forgiveness. Can you ever imagine a grace too powerful to understand? Too powerful. Married people, are you listening? Those of us who are attempting deep friendship, are you listening? Church, are you listening?